My parents paid for my younger sister's honeymoon with my ex-boyfriend, using the emergency fund I'd been contributing $2,000 a month to for 5 years. So I pulled out the remaining $83,000. Their next emergency was not my problem. Hey, Reddit. I'm writing this from my new apartment, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I can breathe without feeling like something heavy is sitting on my chest. What happened with my family over the past few months has been so insane that I still catch myself replaying parts of it at night, wondering how I stayed in that mess for as long as I did. My name is Avery Collins. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, I was the responsible daughter, the dependable sister, the one who fixed everything before anyone else even admitted it was broken. I was the family ATM with a pulse, the walking solution, the person everyone called when life got expensive, inconvenient, or messy. My younger sister, Delilah, is 28, and from the day she was born, the rules were different for her. Mom had complications during delivery and spent nearly a week in the ICU afterward. The story got repeated so many times growing up, it became family scripture. Delilah was the miracle baby, the child who almost cost them everything, so naturally, she became the child they could never say no to. I grew up beside that myth, and when you grow up beside a myth, you become practical, quiet, useful, forgettable. The contrast between us was never subtle. For my 10th birthday, I got a second-hand bike from Walmart with a crooked handlebar and one brake that squealed every time I used it. For Delilah's 8th, she got a custom BMX with bright paint, upgraded shocks, and a giant red bow across the seat like it had been delivered from heaven itself. When I turned 16, I spent an entire summer mowing lawns, changing oil, and helping a neighbor repaint fences just to buy my first car. It was a beat-up '98 Honda Civic with busted air conditioning and a passenger door that only opened if you shoved your shoulder into it first. When Delilah got her license, my parents handed her the keys to a brand new Mustang. Paid in full. No job. No strings. Just smiles, photos in the driveway, and Mom crying about how fast her baby was growing up. When I graduated high school with a 3.8 GPA, we celebrated at Applebee's. Dad spent most of dinner talking about Delilah's upcoming freshman year and how much potential she had if she just applied herself. When Delilah barely dragged herself across the graduation stage with a GPA that looked more like a warning label than an achievement, my parents threw her a huge backyard party with catered food, a DJ, rented lights, and what felt like half the neighborhood there applauding her for surviving high school. That was my family in one snapshot. I worked for praise. She existed for applause. The pattern followed us into adulthood. I put myself through community college while working full-time as a mechanic. I earned my degree in automotive technology the hard way. Night classes, calloused hands, caffeine headaches, and rent always due too soon. I started at the bottom in a repair shop, learned every ugly, greasy part of the business, built trust one customer at a time, and 5 years ago, I opened my own place, Collins Auto Solutions. It did well, better than well. After expenses, I was bringing in around $180,000 a year, but there was nothing glamorous about it. It was 60-hour weeks, skipped weekends, aching shoulders, invoices at midnight, and the kind of exhaustion that sits inside your bones. I earned every dollar. Delilah, meanwhile, tried 3 different colleges and dropped out of every one of them. First was State University. She lasted 1 semester before deciding the professors were too demanding. Then community college. She made it about a year before flunking out. Then technical school for HVAC repair. She quit after 3 weeks because, and I quote, "I'm not spending my life sweating in attics like some goblin." Over the last decade, she maybe worked 6 months total. Her longest job was at a vape shop. Part-time, 20 hours a week. She quit because the hours were destroying her mental balance. But my parents always had a reason ready. Delilah was finding herself, exploring her options, taking a non-traditional path, protecting her peace. I remember one Thanksgiving so clearly it still makes my jaw tighten. Delilah announced, over sweet potatoes and dry turkey, that she was dropping out of her 3rd program. I had just closed a major service contract with a fleet company and had been pulling 80-hour weeks to make it happen. Dad lifted his wine glass and smiled at her. "We're proud of you, sweetheart," he said. "It takes courage to walk away from what isn't right for you." Everyone nodded. Mom looked misty-eyed. I sat there staring at my plate, thinking about the student loans I was still paying off, and the fact that no one had ever toasted me for surviving anything. About 7 years ago, Dad sat me down at the kitchen table with what he called a serious proposal. Mom had recently gone through a cancer scare that turned out to be benign, but it shook them. He said they wanted to start a family emergency fund. Something the three of us, my parents and me, could contribute to so that if medical bills or home disasters hit, we'd be ready. It'll give us peace of mind, Dad said, stirring his coffee in that absent way he always did when he was trying to sound reasonable. We're not getting any younger, Avery. Medical debt can destroy a family. It made sense to me. I had savings. I was doing well. I believed in planning ahead. And despite everything, despite the favoritism and the years of swallowing disappointment, I still wanted to believe my family could function like one when it mattered. So I told him I could contribute $500 a month. He hesitated. Then he looked down at the table and said, "We were actually hoping you could do $2,000. I laughed at first because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Delilah's in a rough spot financially, he added quickly. She can probably contribute $50 or $100 here and there when she can. $2,000 a month. $24,000 a year. I remember sitting there, hearing the refrigerator hum in the kitchen, hearing a dog bark somewhere outside, and thinking that number did not belong in a family conversation. It belonged in a contract, a loan agreement, a payroll document. But then I looked at my mother, at the fear she still carried after the cancer scare, at my father trying to sound brave. And I said yes. That was my mistake. Every month for 5 years, I transferred $2,000 into that joint savings account. My name was on it along with my parents, but I never touched it, never monitored it, never treated it as mine. I treated it like a sacred thing, a promise, a shield around the people who raised me. Delilah's contributions were almost non-existent. Some months she dropped in $50, once or twice, maybe $100. One time she contributed $200, and Mom acted like she'd donated a kidney. Meanwhile, I kept paying. Not just into the fund, either. When Dad's truck needed a new transmission, I did the labor for free and covered over $2,000 in parts. When their water heater died in January, I paid half the replacement cost. When Delilah crashed her car while texting, I repaired it at my shop and only charged her cost for parts. When Mom needed new tires, I got them wholesale and installed them for free. When part of their roof started leaking, I climbed up there myself, patched it temporarily, then kicked in $2,000 for the professional repair. Every single time I got the same soft smile. "You're such a good daughter, Avery. The reliable one. We can always count on you." And every single time, Delilah got a pass. She was between things. She was stressed. She was going through a hard season. My boyfriend at the time, Ryan Mercer, hated the whole dynamic long before I admitted there was one. We'd been together for 3 years, and he watched me move heaven and earth for people who barely thanked me before asking for more. Once, we had a trip to Hawaii booked, flights paid, hotel reserved. It was supposed to be the first real vacation I'd taken in years. Then Dad called about a family emergency. Delilah needed money for first and last month's rent because she'd been kicked out of her apartment for not paying for 3 months. Ryan stared at me from across my couch while I sat there canceling bookings on my laptop. "How is that an emergency?" he asked. I remember the blue glow of the screen on his face, the disbelief in his voice, the silence after. I gave him the same line my parents had trained into me since childhood. "It's family. That's what we do." He looked at me for a long time before saying quietly, "No, Avery. That's what people do when they've been taught their life matters less than everyone else's." I was furious with him for saying it, not because he was wrong, because he was right and I wasn't ready to hear it. We broke up 2 months later. At the time, I told myself he was selfish, that he didn't understand loyalty, that some people just weren't built for family. Now I know he saw the trap years before I did. And the worst part? When I told my mother about the breakup, she looked relieved. She touched my arm and said almost gently, "I never felt like Ryan really fit with us anyway." I should have heard the warning in that. I didn't. Not yet. About a year after Ryan and I broke up, Delilah brought someone new to a family barbecue. I was at the grill in my parents' backyard, turning burgers with one hand and trying not to inhale too much smoke with the other, when I heard a laugh that hit me like a hand around the throat. I froze. For one stupid second, my brain refused to place it. It was too familiar, too specific. The kind of sound you don't forget even when you want to. Then I turned, and there he was, Ryan, standing beside my younger sister like he belonged there. Delilah was tucked against his side, smiling like she'd won something, her manicured fingers curled around his forearm. Ryan looked almost amused, like he knew exactly what this would do to me and was already bracing for the reaction. "Avery," he said. My name sounded wrong in his mouth. Too casual. Too easy. I remember the smell of charcoal, the sound of someone's kids splashing in the inflatable pool, my mother laughing from somewhere behind them, as if nothing in the world had tilted. Delilah beamed. "Oh my God," she said in that fake bright voice she used when she wanted to perform innocence. "You know Ryan?" I just stared at her. Ryan cleared his throat and gave me a weak smile. "I didn't realize at first that you and Delilah were sisters. Small world." Small world. That was the line. Not "I'm sorry." Not "this is awkward." Not "I know this might hurt you." Small world. Delilah slipped her arm more tightly through his and tilted her head. "We've been seeing each other for a few months." A few months. Not a week. Not some accidental run-in. Not one weird dinner. Months. Behind them, my mother lit up like Christmas morning. "Well, isn't this amazing?" she said, coming over with a bowl of pasta salad in her hands. "Ryan already knows the family. That makes everything easier." Easier. Dad walked over a second later, took one look at Ryan, and clapped him on the shoulder like he was already his future son-in-law. "Good choice," he said to Delilah with a grin. "Smart, charming, seems grounded." Grounded. Ryan, the man who had once sat in my apartment and told me I was letting my family drain me dry, now stood there smiling while they welcomed him into the same machine. Not one person looked at me. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not even my aunt, who was standing by the patio table pretending not to stare. No one asked if I was okay. No one acknowledged the bomb that had just gone off in the middle of a family barbecue. I put the spatula down very carefully because I could feel my hands starting to shake. Then I walked inside the house. I stood in the half-dark kitchen for maybe 30 seconds, staring at the sink, trying to get air into my lungs in a way that didn't feel obvious. My reflection in the window over the counter looked pale and sharp, like someone had erased the soft parts of my face. I heard the sliding door open behind me. "Ryan." "Of course." "Avery," he said quietly. "Can we not make this a whole thing?" I turned so fast the cabinet handle dug into my hip. "A whole thing?" He lifted both hands like I was the unreasonable one already. "You and I ended a long time ago." "You're dating my sister." He exhaled through his nose. "I know how it looks." "No," I said. "You know exactly how it looks because that's how it is." His jaw tightened. "We connected," he said, "after you and I were over. Delilah and I ran into each other. We started talking and—" "And what?" I asked. "You accidentally fell into my family? You accidentally chose the one person in my life this would hurt most?" He said nothing. That silence told me more than any explanation would have. I laughed once, but it came out brittle. "Did she tell you all about me first? How I always worked too much? How I chose my family over everything? Did you two bond over how exhausting it was to know me?" His eyes flickered just for a second. That was enough. I stepped closer. "You knew," I said. "Both of you knew exactly what this would do." He looked away. And there it was. Not guilt, not shame. Cowardice. I walked past him and back outside before I said something I couldn't take back in front of everyone. The rest of the afternoon felt like a badly written nightmare where everyone but me had the script. Delilah sat on Ryan's lap near the patio, like she was auditioning for a perfume ad. Mom kept bringing them drinks. Dad joked with Ryan about sports. My cousins whispered and stole glances at me, then looked away when I caught them. Nobody confronted the weirdness, because acknowledging it would mean admitting there was something rotten underneath the family's cheerful little surface. At one point, Mom actually waved me over and said, "Come sit with us, honey. We're all family here." The words hit me so hard I almost smiled. We're all family here. Apparently, even the man who had once loved me could be seamlessly reassigned. That evening, after most of the guests left and the sky had gone pink and bruised over the fence line, I found Delilah by herself near the back gate, scrolling on her phone. I didn't ease into it. "What are you doing?" She didn't even look up at first. "Checking messages." "You know what I mean." Now she looked at me and smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the small, satisfied kind she got when she knew she had control of the room. "You don't own people, Avery." I stared at her. She slipped her phone into her pocket and leaned one shoulder against the fence like she had all the time in the world. "You and Ryan broke up over a year ago," she said. "You don't get permanent rights to someone just because you dated them first." "This isn't about rights. This is about decency." She shrugged. "Maybe he likes me better." There are sentences that don't sound cruel unless you know the person saying them. That one did. "You went after him on purpose," I said. She gave me a long look, then tilted her head. "And if I did?" The honesty of it almost made me dizzy. I felt something in me pull taut. "Why?" Her lips curved. And she said very softly, "Because for once, I wanted to be the one chosen." I almost laughed at the insanity of that. For once. She had been chosen our entire lives. The better gifts. The softer rules. The louder celebrations. The endless excuses. But that wasn't enough. She wanted my leftovers too, my history, my pain, my place in the room. "You are unbelievable," I said. "And you are dramatic," she shot back. "Ryan says you always make everything heavier than it needs to be." There it was, not even subtle. He'd been talking about me with her, comparing versions of me, handing pieces of my life to my sister like private jokes. I should have been surprised. I wasn't. I just felt tired in a way that reached deeper than anger. "Stay away from me," I said. She laughed under her breath. "That won't be easy if you ever show up to family dinners again." I walked away before I slapped the smile off her face. The next few months were a masterclass in emotional humiliation. Ryan became a fixture. At Sunday dinners, he sat beside Delilah with his hand on her back, while Mom asked if he wanted seconds. At Thanksgiving, Delilah fed him pie from her fork while my father grinned like he was watching some wholesome love story unfold. At Christmas, there was a framed photo of the two of them on my parents' mantle. My parents acted like none of this was inappropriate. Worse, they acted like my discomfort was the only problem. One night after dinner, I finally snapped and asked Mom in the kitchen, "Do you honestly not see how twisted this is?" She turned from the sink with wet hands and a wounded expression, like I had insulted her personally. "Avery, sweetheart, you have got to stop this." "Stop what?" "This bitterness. Ryan and Delilah are happy. You and Ryan ended for a reason. Why can't you just be mature about it?" Mature. That word again. In my family, mature always meant silent. It meant absorb the hit without making anyone uncomfortable. It meant let Delilah do whatever she wants, then manage your own reaction so nobody has to face what she did. Dad was worse. When I tried to explain that it wasn't just awkward, it was cruel, he looked at me over the top of his reading glasses and said, "You're too old to be territorial about an ex-boyfriend." Territorial. Like I was an animal. Like this was pettiness, not betrayal. Ryan and Delilah moved in together not long after that. An apartment, ironically, that I had helped Delilah afford months earlier when she'd called crying about rent, and I'd wired money without asking enough questions. When I pointed that out, Dad told me not to hold money over people's heads. That phrase stayed with me, because it was always fine for them to hold obligation over mine. Family, loyalty, support, sacrifice. But the second I remembered what I had actually given, suddenly I was petty for noticing. So I started pulling away. I skipped Sunday dinners. I stopped dropping by unannounced. I took longer to return calls. At first, I blamed work because work was easy. Work was always believable. The shop needed me. Inventory issues. Late clients. Emergency repairs. Payroll. Staffing. Some of it was true. Most of it was just easier than admitting I could not sit at a table and watch my ex-boyfriend pour wine for my sister while my mother called them adorable. Mom noticed immediately. The voicemails started first. "Family's important, Avery. We hardly see you anymore. Delilah and Ryan keep asking where you are." That part almost made me choke every time. I'm sure they asked. Probably with smiles. Probably while eating food I'd helped pay for in one way or another. I still contributed to the emergency fund every month. That's the part that makes me angriest now, when I look back. Even while I was pulling away emotionally, even while I was being quietly erased in my own family, I kept sending $2,000 like clockwork. By that point, my total was around $120,000. Delilah's total was maybe $2,000, if I was being generous. And even that was probably padded by Mom slipping her money so she could make a symbolic deposit and everyone could clap about how hard she was trying. Then 3 months ago, Delilah got engaged. I found out on Instagram. Of course I did. A beach at sunset, pink sky, white dress, Ryan on one knee, Delilah crying with her hands over her mouth in a performance so polished it looked rehearsed. The ring caught the light like a tiny weapon. The caption read, "I said yes to my best friend and the love of my life. Forever starts now." My mother commented within 2 minutes, "So happy for you both. You deserve the world." Dad wrote, "Proud of you, sweetheart. Welcome officially to the family, Ryan." My aunt added 6 heart emojis and called them perfect together. Perfect. I sat in my apartment that night with the phone in my hand and a drink going warm beside me, scrolling through comment after comment from relatives who acted like this relationship had descended from heaven, fully blessed and morally uncomplicated. Nobody called me first. Nobody warned me. Nobody said, "This might blindside you." I was just expected to absorb it like everything else. That was the moment something started to change. Not because I still wanted Ryan. By then I didn't. Whatever version of him I had loved was gone, or maybe had never existed at all. No, what changed was something colder, clearer. I realized this was not one isolated betrayal. It was a system, a family pattern with different costumes. Delilah wanted something, so everyone rearranged themselves around her. My feelings were always the excess furniture they expected me to move quietly out of the way. A few nights later, my best friend Mason came over after I texted him that I needed a drink and maybe an alibi for murder. He had been watching the entire thing unfold for years, with the kind of horrified clarity only outsiders have. We sat on my couch with beers balanced on our knees while the city lights blinked through the window. "This is insane, right?" I asked finally. "Like objectively insane?" Mason looked at me for half a second. "Avery, your family has been emotionally and financially feeding off you for years. The insane part is that you're only just now asking." I let out a breath that felt like it scratched on the way out. "They're getting married in June," I said. "Destination wedding, Cancun." He turned toward me. "You're not going." I laughed once. "No." But even then, even with the bitterness lodged under my ribs and the humiliation still fresh enough to sting, I had no idea the wedding would not just be another insult. It would be the thing that finally broke the entire structure open. Because 2 weeks after the engagement, my mother called me with that careful voice she used when she was about to dress selfishness up as family duty. And by the time that call ended, I would understand exactly what my place in that family had always been. Not daughter, not sister, not loved one. Funding source. The call came on a Thursday evening. I was closing up the shop, grease still under my nails, invoices half finished on my desk, when my phone lit up with Mom. For a second, my chest tightened automatically. That tone she'd used lately. It had started to sound like warnings disguised as conversations. I answered anyway. "Hey, Mom, what's wrong?" There was a pause. Not long, just long enough to set the hook. "Nothing's wrong exactly," she said, soft and careful. "I just need to talk to you about something important." Important. That word used to mean hospital visits, test results, repairs, real problems. Now it just meant brace yourself. "What is it?" "It's about Delilah and Ryan's wedding." Of course it was. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling tiles that always needed replacing but never quite got done. "Okay." "They've been planning this beautiful destination wedding," she continued, her voice warming slightly, like she was already picturing it, "but it's gotten more expensive than expected." I said nothing. I could already feel the direction this was going, like a train I couldn't stop but could see coming from miles away. The venue, the flights, the hotel, the photographer, everything adds up, she said. "You know how these things are." No, I didn't. Because I had never planned a wedding I couldn't afford, and then expected someone else to cover it. "So they're scaling it back?" I asked slowly. Another pause. "Well, that's what we thought at first. Here it comes." "But this is Delilah's wedding, Avery. It's a once-in-a-lifetime moment." My fingers tightened slightly around the phone. "And your father and I talked," she said, and her tone shifted into that firm, final register I recognized too well, the one that meant the decision had already been made. "We're going to use the emergency fund to help cover the costs, the wedding and the honeymoon." The words landed like something heavy dropping through my chest. I didn't react immediately. I couldn't. My brain just stalled. "The emergency fund," I repeated, slower than I meant to. "Yes," she said, almost relieved I understood. "It's not technically an emergency, but family milestones matter too. This is about supporting your sister as she starts her life." Supporting your sister. With my money. "With the emergency fund," I said again. "The fund Dad said was specifically for medical emergencies and unexpected disasters." "It's still for the family," she said, a little sharper now. "This is family, Avery. This is important." "No," I said quietly. "This is not what that fund was for." She exhaled like I was being difficult on purpose. "You're focusing on semantics," she said. "We're talking about your sister's wedding. We want to give her something beautiful." My hand had gone numb. "How much?" I asked. Silence. Just her breathing on the other end. "Mom," I said louder now. "How much?" 40,000. 40. I closed my eyes. "The venue package is 32, she added quickly. "It's right on the beach, it's gorgeous, and we're giving them 8,000 for the honeymoon. They want to go to Bora Bora. They've always dreamed about it." I almost laughed. It didn't come out right. It sounded like something breaking. 40,000, I repeated. 5 years. $120,000 I had put into that account. 60-hour work weeks. Missed vacations. A relationship I had let collapse because I kept choosing my family over everything else. And they had just decided, without asking me, that a third of that would go toward funding my sister's wedding to my ex-boyfriend. "Avery," Mom said gently now, like I was the one who needed calming. "This is a happy thing. You should be happy for her." My throat felt tight. "My sister's wedding," I said slowly, "to the man she started dating knowing he was my ex. That wedding." "You need to let that go," she snapped. the softness gone. They're in love. You're holding on to something that ended a long time ago. This isn't about Ryan, I said, even though part of me knew it wasn't entirely true. This is about you taking money I contributed for emergencies and using it like it's Delilah's personal trust fund. It's family money, she said immediately. No, I said, it's mostly my money. There was a long silence. Then, coldly, we all contribute in different ways. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear for a second, just to make sure I had heard that right. Different ways. Right. I worked. Delilah existed. Same thing. I need to go, I said. Avery, wait, she said quickly. We also wanted to talk about you being part of the wedding. Delilah thinks it would mean a lot if you... I hung up. I didn't even remember making the decision. My finger just moved. The call ended. And suddenly the shop felt too small. Too quiet. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, the words replaying in my head like a loop that wouldn't shut off. 40,000. Emergency fund. Bora Bora. Family. It was like everything snapped into focus at once. Not gradually. Not gently. Just clarity. I wasn't part of a family system. I was the system. I was the resource they pulled from whenever Delilah wanted something she hadn't earned. And I had been participating in it, feeding it, enabling it. For 5 years. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone buzzed again. This time it was Mason. I answered without thinking. You busy? He asked. No, I said. They're using the emergency fund to pay for Delilah's wedding. Silence. Then, very clearly, how much? 40,000. Another pause. Then, sharper now, you need to get your money out of that account. It's a joint account, I said automatically. Avery, he cut in. Listen to me. They just showed you exactly how they view that money. Not as an emergency fund, not as something protected. It's Delilah's backup plan. I pressed my hand to my forehead. They didn't even ask me, I said. I know, he said. That's the point. They just decided. I know. And told me after. I know. Each sentence felt heavier than the last. You've put in what, over 100,000? He asked. About 120. And Delilah? Maybe 2,000, if that. Then that's not a family fund, he said flatly. That's your money sitting in a shared account they think they can spend. I didn't answer, because I knew he was right. You need to pull it, he said, now, before they decide they also need a down payment on a house or a new car or whatever comes next. They'll lose it, I said quietly. The wedding. They'll adjust, he replied, like adults do. That word again. Adults. Responsible. Concepts that somehow never applied to Delilah. I hung up a few minutes later, sat there another 10, and then finally stood. Went home, walked inside, dropped my keys on the counter, and opened my laptop. My hands were shaking as I logged into the account. I hadn't checked the balance in years. Not because I didn't care, because I trusted them, because I believed it was safe. The number appeared on the screen. $97,433.52. Almost 100,000. 5 years of my life, sitting there, waiting to be spent. There was already a withdrawal listed. $40,000. Wedding/honeymoon. They didn't even hide it. Didn't rename it. Didn't pretend. Just took it like it was theirs. Something inside me went very still. Not angry. Not yet. Just quiet. I clicked into the transfer tab, entered my personal account. Paused. For 1 second. One stupid, lingering second where every voice I'd grown up with whispered the same thing. Family comes first. Don't be selfish. They need you. Then another voice, quieter but sharper, cut through it. When have they ever needed you as anything other than a solution? My fingers moved. $83,000. I left the rest. Enough to cover what Delilah had ever contributed, plus a little extra. If they wanted to use family money, they could use theirs. Not mine. I hit confirm. The transfer processed instantly. No warning. No delay. No permission needed. 30 seconds. 5 years undone in half a minute. I stared at the screen after it cleared, waiting for guilt, waiting for panic, waiting for that familiar wave of, what have you done? It never came. Instead, something else settled in. Lightness. Not joy. Not yet. But relief. Like I had been carrying something so heavy for so long, I had forgotten what it felt like to stand without it. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was bracing for the next demand. I just sat there, breathing. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew exactly what was coming next. Because families like mine don't let go quietly when the money stops. The blowback didn't take long. 7:02 a.m. The next morning, my phone started vibrating across the nightstand. Dad. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. What did you do? No greeting, no hesitation. Just anger, sharp and immediate. I sat up slowly, my back against the headboard, sunlight barely pushing through the blinds. I withdrew my contributions, I said. You emptied the account, he snapped. The bank notified me about a massive transfer. What the hell were you thinking? I left over $14,000, I replied calmly. That's more than what Delilah ever contributed, plus what you and Mom put in. It's still a family fund, just not my money anymore. There was a stunned silence. Then, you can't just take that money. That's not how this works. Really? I said, because using it for a wedding without even asking me didn't seem to follow any rules either. His breathing got heavier. We needed that money for the wedding. Deposits are already down. Contracts are signed. You wanted that money, I corrected. There's a difference. Avery, this is your sister's wedding, he said, like that should end the conversation. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. So is a medical emergency, I shot back, which is what that fund was supposed to be for. You're being selfish. There it was. That word. I felt something in my chest go from tight to sharp. Selfish, I repeated. I've contributed over $100,000 to that account. I've paid for repairs, emergencies, Delilah's rent, her car, your house, your problems. Every time something went wrong, I showed up. And I'm selfish because I won't fund a destination wedding? This is about Ryan, he snapped. You're still bitter, and you're taking it out on your sister. That did it. Something in me cracked clean through. No, I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. This is about a pattern. It's about 32 years of watching you prioritize Delilah's wants over everything else, including me. This is just the first time I've stopped letting you. She's your sister. She's also the person who chose to date my ex-boyfriend and bring him into this family like nothing was wrong. You're overreacting. And you're ignoring it, I said, like you always do. Silence. Then, colder now, more controlled. If you don't put that money back, don't bother coming to the wedding, or any family gatherings after that. I let that sit for a second. Then I said, I wasn't planning to come anyway. His breath hitched, just slightly. Your mother is devastated. Your mother made the decision, I said. You both did. You're going to regret this. Maybe, I said, but not today. I hung up before he could say anything else. My phone lit up immediately after. Mom, Delilah, Ryan, one after another. Calls, texts, voicemails. I didn't answer. Not a single one. Instead, I got out of bed, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen counter, watching the steam curl up from the mug like I had all the time in the world. The messages started piling in. Delilah, what the hell is wrong with you? You're ruining my wedding over your jealousy. Grow up. Mom, I can't believe you would do something this cruel to your own family. We raised you better than this. Dad, put the money back. This isn't a request. And then, Ryan. That one almost made me laugh. Avery, this is unnecessary. You're being petty and vindictive. You need to move on. Delilah and I are happy. I stared at the message for a long second, then blocked his number. Blocked all of them. Every call, every text, every social account. It felt surgical, like cutting wires one by one until the noise stopped. I called Mason instead. I did it, I said. How do you feel? He asked. I looked around my apartment, quiet for once, no pressure sitting in the corners. Like I can breathe, I said. The wedding went ahead. Not in Cancun. Not on a beach. From what I heard later through mutual friends, it ended up in a hotel conference room downtown. No destination, no ocean backdrop, no Bora Bora honeymoon. Mom and Dad tried to salvage it, but without that $40,000 cushion, reality hit hard. Apparently there were arguments. A lot of them. Delilah wasn't used to hearing the word no attached to anything she wanted. Ryan. Well, Ryan had always liked the idea of things more than the responsibility of them. The cracks showed fast. I didn't go. Didn't watch. Didn't ask for photos. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing something. 3 weeks after the wedding, the real emergency came. Dad had a heart attack. Not a scare. Not a warning. A full collapse at home. Ambulance. Hospital. Emergency surgery. Triple bypass. The kind of situation that turns everything cold and urgent all at once. Mom called me from the hospital. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Her voice was wrecked, crying so hard I could barely understand her. Avery, your father, he collapsed. They say he needs surgery. It's serious. For a moment, everything inside me twisted. This was it. This was what the fund had been for. The exact scenario we had planned around. A real emergency. Real stakes. Real consequences. What do you need? I asked quietly. We don't have enough money, she said. Insurance will cover part of it, but we're looking at $70,000 out of pocket. We need the emergency fund. We need you to put the money back. There it was. I closed my eyes. "What about what's left in the account?" I asked. "It's not enough," she said immediately. "It won't cover everything. Surgery, recovery, medication. Please, Avery, we need the full amount." The full amount. The amount that used to be there. Before they decided a wedding mattered more. "You had the money," I said. Her crying hitched. "We didn't know this would happen." "That's the point," I said. "That's what an emergency fund is for. Things you don't know will happen." "You're really going to do this?" she whispered. "Your father could die." The old guilt surged. Fast, sharp, automatic. But something else held it back this time. Clarity. "I'm sorry he's sick," I said. "I mean that. But I can't help you." Silence. Then, "What do you mean you can't help? This is your father." "This is the consequence of your decision," I said. "You chose to spend $40,000 on a wedding instead of keeping it for emergencies. This is the emergency." Her voice changed. Not broken anymore. Cold. "If he dies because of this," she said, each word precise, "I will never forgive you." I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, the weight of that sentence hanging between us. "You already chose not to protect him," I said quietly. "You just don't want to admit it." "You're heartless." "No," I said, "I'm done." I hung up, turned off my phone, and sat there in the silence. 2 weeks later, I heard through Mason that Dad survived. The surgery went well. He was recovering. But the cost? They had taken out a massive loan, debt they couldn't afford. Delilah and Ryan were being pressured to help, which, from what I heard, was going about as well as you'd expect from two people who had never learned how to handle responsibility. The marriage? Already strained, already cracking. My parents? Furious. They told everyone I refused to help in a life or death situation. Left out everything else. Of course they did. That's how stories like this survive. Not on truth, on selective memory. Delilah tried to show up at my shop a few days ago. My employees told me she stood outside yelling for nearly 20 minutes, calling me selfish, saying I was killing our father, saying I'd always been jealous of her. I watched the security footage later. She looked desperate, not angry, not superior, just cornered. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. I just turned off the screen. Because their emergency was finally not my responsibility anymore. 2 weeks passed before I turned my phone back on. Not because I was afraid of what I'd see, but because I already knew. When I finally did, the notifications came in like a delayed storm. Missed calls, voicemails, messages from numbers I had blocked, trying again from new ones. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my character. "Aunt Lisa, I don't even recognize you anymore. How could you abandon your father like that?" "Uncle Mark, family is everything. You'll regret this when it's too late." "Cousin Brielle, I heard what you did. That's cold, Avery. Really cold." It was almost impressive, how cleanly the story had been rewritten. Not a word about the emergency fund being drained for a wedding. Not a word about 5 years of contributions. Not a word about the pattern. Just one clean narrative. Avery refused to help. I scrolled through them slowly, then set the phone down. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. Because I knew something now that I hadn't known before. People who want to misunderstand you will do it with or without facts. Mason was the one who filled in the parts I didn't see. We met at our usual bar, same scratched wooden table, same low lighting, same quiet hum of conversations around us. He slid a beer toward me. "Your dad's stable," he said. "Recovery's going to be long, but he made it." I nodded. A strange mix of relief and distance settled in my chest. "I'm glad he's alive," I said, and I meant it. But that doesn't change anything." Mason gave a small nod like he had expected that answer. "They're in serious debt," he continued. "Loan for the surgery, payments they can't really afford." "And Delilah?" I asked. He let out a short laugh. "Apparently your parents expected her and Ryan to help. Big surprise. That's not going well." Of course it wasn't. Delilah had never been required to carry anything heavy in her life. Ryan had only ever been good at stepping into situations, not sustaining them. "From what I hear," Mason added, "there's already tension, money arguments, blame. The honeymoon downgrade didn't help either." I took a sip of my drink, didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say. It wasn't satisfying. Not the way people imagine it would be. It was just inevitable. "They showed up at your shop again?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Security handled it." He raised an eyebrow. "And you didn't go out?" I shook my head. "I used to think I had to," I said. "Every time. Fix it. Smooth it over. Make it okay again." "And now?" I looked down at my hands, then back up at him. "Now I don't." That was the difference. Not anger, not revenge. Absence. I wasn't in the system anymore. And without me, it had nothing to stabilize it. A few days later, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something made me open it. "Ryan." Of course. I hope you're happy, it started. You destroyed Delilah's wedding. You put stress on our marriage before it even started. You couldn't just let things go. I stared at the screen. Same tone, same deflection, same refusal to take responsibility for anything. You've always been like this, he continued. Controlling, bitter. You can't stand not being the center of everything. That one almost made me smile. Center of everything. I had spent my entire life standing just outside the center, making sure everyone else had what they needed. But sure, that was the story he needed. Delilah deserves better than a sister like you. I didn't respond. Didn't type. Didn't hesitate. I just blocked the number. Again. And this time, I felt nothing when I did it. No anger. No sadness. No urge to explain. Just done. That night, I had dinner with Ethan. He's a physical therapist. Calm in the way that doesn't feel performative. Present. The kind of person who listens without immediately trying to fix or judge. We'd been seeing each other for a few weeks. Nothing rushed. Nothing forced. Just steady. He asked me about my family. Not in a prying way. Just open. So I told him, not everything, but enough. The fund. The wedding. The withdrawal. The call from the hospital. The guilt. The accusations. The silence after. He didn't interrupt. Didn't rush to fill the space. When I finished, he leaned back slightly, studying me. You know what that was, right? He said. I shrugged. A mess? He shook his head. Financial abuse. The word landed differently. Cleaner than everything else people had thrown at me. Not selfish. Not cruel. Not dramatic. Abuse. They trained you to be the solution, he continued, and punished you the second you stopped being useful. I let that sit. Because it was true. In a way I hadn't fully allowed myself to say out loud. You didn't break your family, he added quietly. You just stopped holding it together. Something in my chest loosened. Not all at once, but enough. That weekend I booked the trip. Hawaii. The same one I had canceled years ago. Only this time I wasn't canceling it for anyone. Ethan grinned when I told him. Send me the dates, he said. I'll make sure my schedule lines up. It felt easy. Not earned. Not negotiated. Just mutual. Mason asked me a few nights later, over beers, the same question everyone eventually circles back to. Any regrets? I thought about it. Really thought about it. About the fund. About the wedding. About the hospital call. About the look on Delilah's face in that security footage. About my father lying in a hospital bed. About everything. I regret not seeing it sooner, I said finally. He nodded slowly. I regret thinking that if I gave enough, it would eventually balance out, I continued. That being the responsible one would mean something. And the money, he asked. I met his eyes. No, I said, no regrets about that. Because the truth was simple. The emergency fund had never really been for emergencies. It had been a safety net. For Delilah. Funded by me. And the moment I stopped funding it, reality showed up. Not because I caused it, because I stopped preventing it. My family made their choices. They chose a wedding over preparedness. They chose comfort over responsibility. They chose to treat me like a resource instead of a person. And when the real emergency came, they had nothing left. That wasn't my failure. That was theirs. I'm not the family ATM anymore. I'm not the backup plan. I'm not the silent fixer standing just outside the frame. I'm just Avery. And for the first time in my life, that's enough.